What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JAR. JAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. We're here this week to talk about the Planeswalker's Guide to Kaladesh, once again by the Magic Creative Team collectively. There really can't be spoilers about the story, and while we're not going to talk about it in its entirety, this may be the first one for Kaladesh where I'm going to say that you don't necessarily have to go read it before you watch our review.
Nope.
Because if you've read any of the other stories, then you know what this is. You know everything
there is to know from this story already.
It was kind of a throwaway. It was very informative if I had not read the entire Kaladesh story up to this point.
This would have been a good story to use as an introductory, if when they introduced the set, if this was like the first story, that probably would have worked out nicely, given everybody a background, gotten them interested in the characters, and then start the story. Afterward, it's just repeats of the same old stuff we already knew and don't really care about at this point.
Now, to be completely fair and to give both sides, they did technically give us some new information, or at least unknown information, in that it talked about the ether cycle, which I actually thought was really cool. It's like the what's that called? The scientific method that we, in the way that we would understand it, build, innovate, come up with the idea, etc. The 5 steps, and then taking those 5 steps and making them akin to the races that are on Kaladesh.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I like that a lot. I thought it was
kind of cool, but I don't know. I kind of kept thinking about, like, okay, so what if an elf is, going through their life and they're just like, yeah, I don't want to do this. I want to go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I want to innovate,
Mm-hmm.
What does that elf do?
Mm-hmm. And so, and like I said, they made it akin to elves, Vidalcan, Etherborn, dwarves, humans, and gremlins. And so, again, I thought it was interesting.
Kind of cool to, see what, I guess, races are more suited for those different things,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, but...
So, technically that's new information. Also, it seemed like this story was solely used in an attempt to either get you to go read the Magic stories if you hadn't already, because they gave you the link to that kind of towards the end of the story, or it was to get you psyched up about buying the Art of Kaladesh book that they hyped at the beginning of the story.
And then said was going to come out in January, and I'm like, yeah, no one's going to care about Kaladesh anymore in January.
Well, I mean, Aether Revolt comes out in February, so maybe not, but I originally had thought, it would be a great holiday gift. It would just make sense. If you're putting out the story now, to hype it up for the holidays, make people think, hey, you know what, that's a really good gift that I could get for Amy. I know that she really enjoys the art of Magic the Gathering.
Right.
Let me get it to her for
January.
That's my point. So originally I was like, that makes sense. It'll come out for the holidays. Nope, January, literally after all of that. So that's a bit of a shame. Like I said, I think that this story would have worked. You and I had a little bit of a difference of opinion. I think that this story would have done very well to come out right after the story where Dovin shows up and talks to the Gatewatch, where they're all on Ravnica. So right before we actually get to Kaladesh, so that we can know about Kaladesh before everything goes down there and we have to know about it. You said you thought even before that.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So, because, they talk about Dovin, they talk about Saheeli Rai, they talk about Chandra, they talk about Nissa, and if you take out the end, literally the last portion, which showed each of the story spotlight cards and gave descriptions of what each of those meant, that gave things away because it told you that Pia was alive and stuff like that. So, that kind of gave it away. But to be honest, if you were you would have had to have released this after the cards were spoiled, because you wouldn't this would have spoiled 5 cards from the set. as well as possibly, depending on when it was released, the fact that Saheeli and Dovin and Chandra and Nissa were the 4 Planeswalkers in the set. So there's that balancing act there. And the fact that, if you knew that all those cards existed, then you'd know that Pia was alive because Pia Nalar is a card in the set.
Right.
So if it's after all those cards had been spoiled, then you don't have to worry about when the story's released, but it wasn't a story. It was a compilation. And look, I get it. It's filler. That's totally fine.
I don't know how fine it is.
Well, what I'll say is, we talked about this in the past. I prefer, if they're going to do this, I'm glad that they did this instead of trying to shoehorn a Commander story in that they kind of half-ass and then it doesn't work out and then it leaves us hanging like Conspiracy.
Yeah.
I much prefer, if that's the reason, then that's totally fine and I have no complaints then from that perspective. Because this story is nice if you want to get someone interested in reading about Kaladesh. Have them read this story first.
Yeah.
It doesn't spoil a lot of things. It spoils some things, but it doesn't spoil a lot of things. And then that you can tell them, hey, if you think that's interesting, go read the full story where they go more in depth. And that might be a nice way to introduce someone who is not aware of Magic the Gathering to the Kaladesh story,
That's exactly what I was just thinking.
Which again has been, in my opinion, I think in Amy's, the best one to date that since the new surge in storytelling.
Right. So from this story, I would say it's clear that Wizards is trying to expand their market a little bit, trying to get other people who are not interested in reading the stories and or maybe not even interested in Magic per se to get more invested in these stories and therefore buy product.
Right. And if you're new to this show, we do not work for Wizards of the Coast. We are not being asked by Wizards to make these videos, which is why we can be critical, right? We're not in their pocket where they're like, say only good things. Like, we can say, hey, this story kind of wasn't necessary, but here, and then again, we can also be adults and look at it from both sides and try to say, okay, well, this is the positive aspects of it. And so maybe that's a thing, right? If you have a friend of yours who you wish would be interested in the Magic stories, but you don't know how to present it to them, maybe consider this.
This is a good one to start with.
Right.
For us, we used the... why am I not thinking of it?
I don't know. I also don't know where you're going with this, so I can't help you.
The one with the letters. Geralf.
Oh, games. Gisa and Geralf's story.
Yeah,
games.
That's the one that we kind of used as sort of a fun and interesting introducing our friends to these stories a little bit, just to try and get them to, like, I don't know, be a part of one of these videos and have sort of a more objective opinion, I guess, than just ours, and also kind of just see if they liked it.
Well, right, and we asked them their opinion for those of them that had not read the stories before and maybe didn't care about Magic at all. We asked them their opinion from solely that perspective of, hey, you don't even care about Magic. What did you necessarily you don't care. What did you think? And if you guys missed that, I'll link that up top. You can go check that out. I think I linked that last week or the week before as well. It was just, it was just, because we had kind of talked about it. It's just, that I think is a good one. And definitely something that if we have the opportunity, we definitely would look forward to being able to do something like that again. But
yeah, that particular story, this particular story, and there's probably a couple of other ones that are really, like, good
introductions
stories that are specifically for, like, introducing to friends of yours that you want them to be interested in the stories. And
let us know what you guys think, because for me personally, I think it's a heck of a lot more fun to read the story with another person, because then you can or other people in general, because you can then talk about it a little bit after the fact, and obviously that's why we're making the show. But, like, it, instead of reading it at home or to yourself, and then you're done, and you're like, okay, that was cool.
Right.
And hey, if you don't have that opportunity, that's totally fine, and that's what online forums are for. Maybe Reddit talks about it. Maybe you come to watch this video, and you talk in the comments, or...
maybe leave in the comments if you're someone who has done both. If you're someone who, when you have the chance, you hang out with your friends and read the story as a group. And maybe sometimes you just read it on your own. And you can kind of leave in the comments a sort of comparison of the two different ways of doing it and kind of the pros and cons of it.
Yeah.
You know, what you feel is cool about each method.
So that was really all I had to say for this particular story. I don't know if you had more, but I did have...
There's not really a lot to say about it at this point, because everything that we've read in this particular story is stuff that we've already read.
Correct. And sure, self-promotion, but
like
you're
we said,
interested,
it's a good compilation of that stuff.
Right. Now, sure, self-promotion. If you're interested, I suggest going back and watching our Kaladesh reviews. First of all, I suggest going back and reading the stories. If you have not done so, you're missing out, because they were really, really good. It's definitely worth your time. And then you can come and watch our jars if you want to.
But I will say, too, if you haven't read a single Kaladesh story, this is a good one to start with.
Correct. Yeah, that's
Start
fair.
with this one.
Fair.
And then start from the beginning of the actual Kaladesh stories.
And it does separate it out on the website, so you can go do that. Check it out. You can either Google Uncharted Realms or just go to Magic and go to their articles and you'll find it. You know, go to Magic's website and you'll find it there.
Yeah, and Kaladesh is a good set to start with when reading these stories, because these are the ones that Wizards did the best.
And
frankly.
Definitely the best so far. And it started with, you know, the first story started with a nice introduction to each of the Gatewatch, their individual personalities. You kind of got to see each one of them and what their feelings are and how they are as people, which is a really awesome segue into what I wanted to talk about next. So these stories follow the Gatewatch. They follow the 5 Origins Planeswalkers, as they're being called, because they're the 5 Planeswalkers that Magic has decided these are going to be our focal point. Sure, we're going to throw in mainstays like Kiora and Ajani and got characters like that, and you'll see them coming up. Tezzeret, even, you know, villains as well, and we know Nicol Bolas is coming soon too. But this set had the ladies. It had Chandra and Nissa and Liliana, and seemingly the next block, it looks like, is going to have Jason Gideon kind of together. Now, I don't know.
Also a Johnny in some respect, maybe.
That'd be pretty awesome. I love me some Ajani, that's just me. But
yeah, he's obsessed.
I do, and he's my favorite. He's awesome. But I don't know why I didn't think of this before. And please feel free to say, Joe, you're an idiot, down in the comments below.
I mean, I do that every day, so.
Not in the comments, just in general.
Right. Well, I could start leaving it in the comments.
Please don't. I don't need that.
I'm like the only troll on our channel. Joe, you're such an asshole.
So, but one thing that I realized is, and I've been aware of this as a mechanic within Magic, but the fact that they kind of weaved it into the story is very interesting to me. And Amy doesn't necessarily know what I'm about to talk about. But Magic has the color wheel. It has WUBRG, and that's the order of the color wheel. Magic also has what are called allied colors and enemy colors. And that's the 10 guilds of Ravnica, basically, are compilations of allied colors and enemy colors. Now, allied colors are the 2 colors on the color wheel that touch that one color. So for WUBRG, the U is blue, and it touches the W for white and the B for black, which means that blue-white and blue-black are allied colors, whereas then clearly blue-green and blue-red are enemy colors. And that works for all 5 colors because it's a wheel. While WUBRG is a line, you know, it's one word or an abbreviation, the G would then just loop around to the W, and that's how you get the color wheel. What I find interesting is, and I've been thinking about this, again, only very recently, which, again, feel free to call me a dummy for only just realizing it now, the Planeswalkers clearly, now this I knew, but the Planeswalkers clearly embody their colors from the color wheel very well. They embody the mechanics of the cards that those colors have, etc. It just...
And that's the point.
Right. You know, blue is super overpowered, so it's Jace. Jace likes to gain knowledge, which in Magic is shown by drawing cards. Jace likes to draw you cards. I could go on. I mean, this could be a whole video in and of itself. But what I wanted to talk about was the fact that if you look at the partnerships that are forming within the Gatewatch and the relationships that are forming between the members of the Gatewatch, it's the allied colors. And the combativeness between people within the Gatewatch are the enemy colors. So, Chandra and Jace, for example, in and of themselves are already just at odds. Because Chandra is super impulsive and just runs out and doesn't care. Jace, on the other hand, is contemplative. And he takes his time and he thinks. So that's why I think that, Jace and Chandra are kind of, even in the Kaladesh story at one point, Chandra ran off into the fateful showdown, when Pia was about to be attacked, and Jace is like, don't go now, and Chandra's like, or Jace said, like, not now or something, and Chandra's like, those are my least favorite words, because yeah. Jace wants to take the time and plan, and Chandra's like, nope, I know what to do, and she runs in and usually gets her ass handed to her, but, that's Chandra's personality. Liliana hates Gideon. They are enemy colors, and Liliana talks bad about Gideon all the time. Now, I always say that I think she has a crush on him, but regardless, I mean, Gideon just seemingly is oblivious to the fact that Liliana makes fun of him all the time. But there's also, it's early on from the perspective of the fact that we're going to have these characters and their stories for a while. It's still pretty early on. Yeah. We haven't seen a lot of interaction between Jace and Gideon, although we have seen a good amount. But we also know that Jace and Gideon are going to be together in Amonkhet, which is the next block. And so that will hopefully be an introduction to their relationship as allied colors. Yeah. The allied color pairs.
And it's cool because it's like Liliana has quite a history with Jace, and she kind of made friends with Chandra and allied colors.
Yes, so. and the fact that, like, she doesn't like Gideon and she doesn't understand Nissa.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that in this story, the Kaladesh story, they haven't touched on it as much, but Nissa is on Kaladesh to help Chandra, her allied color, to kind of center herself and help her focus a little bit better and stop being so impulsive, whereas Liliana's there to try to bring... Yes, exactly. And that's brilliant because they are both allies of red. Both green and black are allies of red, but enemies of one another. And so they're trying to pull Chandra in both directions based on their centers and their focus. Right. And they're attempting to pull away from the other one, but the other one is there as well. It works out so well. And again, when I thought of that, when I realized that, when I was talking about it or thinking about it to myself, I was like, that's brilliant. That's just brilliant. Because my preferred method of storytelling is show, don't tell. So instead of Jace, for example, getting super contemplative, or Tamio even, when we saw her last, saying, oh, well, you are the Gatewatch, but you all have very different methodologies, and some of your thoughts processes combine well together and others don't. Instead of beating you over the head with that, because I could absolutely see that that would have happened.
Right. Instead, you really want to be shown the ways in which that is correct.
Right. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. I applaud the creative team for doing that because it took me this long to realize it, and I have a show where I review these stories. So, and again, if you guys knew it right away, be honest, because I'm being honest about the fact that I didn't think of it until recently, but if you guys knew it all along, you're like, come on, Joe, really?
Well, but I mean, even if you didn't think of it, it just makes sense.
Right,
because from a character development and personality standpoint of the characters.
Yes. Well, and the nice thing now is it's one of those, something you can't unsee now. Now you know it, right? If this is new for you and I just helped you out, then you're welcome. I was super happy to have realized it myself. But now it's the kind of thing where every time it happens, every time you see an interaction between two planeswalkers, you can be like, well, allied colors, so that's why. Or, well, enemy colors, so that's why.
Well, but at the same time, too, it might be kind of an interesting way for Wizards to try and bridge that divide a little bit.
Well, and again...
They're all in the Gatewatch.
Mm-hmm.
They're a group. So maybe towards the beginning, because we still are in the beginning sort of stage of the formation of this group, we can see a lot of combativeness from enemy colors. But maybe as things progress, we'll start to see that diminish because they kind of turn into a family.
Well,
and then maybe that's kind of Wizards' way of, I don't know, showing that maybe enemy colors won't stay enemies.
Well, and I mean, they're obviously they're not
much.
always enemies, because as I mentioned, there are 10 guilds on Ravnica that are 2-color pairs, and so the enemy colors have guilds. The enemy colors have fetch lands and fast lands and things like that. You know, these lands exist that produce these 2 colors that are at war with one another, but they can work together. So, you know, you can have red and white work together as Boros, but even though they're enemies, you know, even though Gideon, for example, is probably going to, if and when he trains Chandra, which we heard about very briefly, he is going to try to get her to be more focused and more controlled, and she wants to be wild and crazy and all over the place, and so...
You know, flames and whatnot.
Right, but since we're talking about it, we have not seen a lot of interaction between some of the Planeswalkers. Again, it's pretty early on. We haven't seen a story from Gideon's perspective yet. Maybe Amonkhet will be that story. But we haven't seen a lot of interaction between Gideon and Nissa. You know?
Yeah, that's true too.
At all. And so I'm very interested. And technically, we haven't seen a lot of interaction between Liliana and Nissa face to face. You see it kind of through Chandra in that what one wants Chandra to do versus what the other wants Chandra to do, but you haven't seen them face to face yet. You know, Liliana mentions, you know, that's a weird one, or whatever she said in that initial story for Kaladesh. But it's so interesting to me. I've always said many times, if you're a longtime watcher of the show, I love character moments. That's my absolute favorite. When they interact with one another, how they interact with one another. That's what I want to see. That's what I love to see. And the fact that it took me this long is a little upsetting to me, but it also just makes me tip my hat to Wizards to the creative team for having another layer. Yeah. Just another layer of their storytelling.
Executing that layer well.
Yeah.
Because even though it took us this long to realize it, looking back on the stories that we've already seen, it's hard to see how they didn't make that happen.
Yeah.
And that makes us feel dumb for not noticing it, but it makes us feel proud that they did such a great job of keeping that cohesive and, you know, and even if it's not something that they were totally thinking about in the moment when they began doing these stories, it's something that they obviously developed into wanting to make happen because they did such a good job of sticking to that.
Yeah. And they're being very true to what their colors mean, which is important for them as a business and as a brand. It just makes sense that if these are your colors and these are what your colors do, you need to stay on that message. That's very important. That's like a typical business tactic. That's a political tactic as well. You stay on message. And so, and it's important for character building and in story that you stay with that character. Now, we saw amazing character development between Nissa and Chandra in these stories, especially in the Deadlock Trap story, where it ended with the two of them sitting in the Deadlock Trap and being like, you know, no, you run away. Yeah. You planeswalk away, I'll stay.
Basically waiting to die.
And realizing that, you know, no, I don't want to leave. I want to stay here with my friend.
Yeah.
And that whole story came together from the two of them getting to know each other better, and that's the whole reason why Nissa came to Kaladesh in the first place, was because of Chandra, and noticing that Chandra really did want help. And came to Nissa for help, and then got too flustered and ran away, and Nissa pursued her, and so it's such...
Nissa felt responsible.
Yes, but it's such an amazing relationship between the two. It works so well, like Amy said. It works so well, and I look forward to seeing all of the different interactions that the color pie, the enemy, the ally colors bring to these Planeswalkers, to their interactions with one another. I love it. It makes me so... That realization on my part makes me so excited for what's to come.
Yeah, it's going to bring another element, definitely, to the stories and to the characters.
And to our reviews. I'm hitting stuff. And that was really loud. and to our reviews as well. We'll be able to talk about that a heck of a lot more now, because we've now noticed it. And I'm genuinely curious, and... Again, you can lie if you want. If you didn't know, you can lie and be like, I knew the whole time, Joe's an idiot. That's fine, I don't really care. But I genuinely want to know if that's something that you guys hadn't thought of, if it makes sense to you, if you feel that there are holes in our discussion, in our opinion,
if
and you're like,
examples where you were like, wait a minute, what about this one time where this person said this to this,
Totally.
Go ahead, leave it in the comments.
That's
That's
like
we've forgotten about that.
That's like the epitome of geekdom, is picking apart little individual things and being like, well, there was this one time that Chandra spoke to Gideon.
Just what you do doesn't mean that it's the epitome of geekdom.
Okay, fair enough. Again, you can let me know that in the comments too. But anyway, that was kind of our discussion for this video. I don't, definitely at this point, last week we were like, oh, next week we'll do Commander stories. I now have no idea what next week's story is going to be, but whether there is one, whether there isn't one, we will be back no matter what, whether we have to do an older story or whether we're going to do a new one and then find other things to talk about, kind of like this.
If there's a specific story that is old that you want us to read, maybe leave that in the comments.
And if there are stories next week, it might take us a little while to get to them, but they will be something we'll keep in the back of our minds. We've got some things churning in our brains here. So stay tuned for that. Guys, for us, you can subscribe down below to find out when more JAR videos come out. When Aether Revolt comes out, we'll be opening those videos. We've got maybe some Kaladesh openings coming up. I have to see what we have. But we still have a bunch. You can go check those out. Maybe I'll link one at the top. Maybe I already did. But, guys, this has been another episode of JAR. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, as always, for joining us in showing off your...
#Vorthos Pride, guys.
We thank you so much. Speaking of hashtags, you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Those links are down in the description box below. Like we said, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of this video, of our analysis, of this week's story, of what next week might... have in store for us.
What do you guys think is going to be next week's story?
Unless you know, and then tell us that you know.
Oh, yeah.
But regardless, guys, thank you so much, as always, for watching from the Geek for All YouTube channel. I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.